our ears, Lord. Open our hearts. Open our eyes. Open the eyes of my heart, Father, so that I can see beyond and above, not just through our five senses, Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Lucky, for that prayer. Well, that song, "You're a good, good Father." Yes, you are. And I think for a lot of us, we can sing these songs, but whenever we're face to face with a situation that it's not under our control, something that it's out of our hands, like the times we're living in right now, many times we wonder, are you a good father? Or do you even care about me? And you know, moments like this, I think it's many times it opens up again that wounded, that broken heart, you know. The other day I shared with my support group a poem that I read, and I wanted to share it with you guys because I think it will connect us into what we're going to be talking today. And this is from, it's a poet, so Lucky will read it to you, and I want you guys to pay attention.
Okay, guys, I hope you're paying attention. If not, please pay attention and listen to the words, yeah? Up to here, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh God, if I worship you in fear of hell, burn me in hell. If I worship you in hope of paradise, shut me out from paradise. But if I worship you for your own sake, do not withhold from me your everlasting beauty.
So I read this poem last week, and
Thursday, right?
It captivated me because I have been there where I would do things out of the fear of going to hell. I have been there, and I think my heart is still somewhat there out of all the promises. If I do this, you will bless me. If I, you know, of paradise, you know, what heaven is going to look like. You know, I can wait to get there, so there'll be no money transaction. I don't have to worry about paying bills. I don't have to worry about eating bread and gaining weight, you know. I mean, so many things that I still feel it's transactional, you know. It's a transaction, you know. I do this so you can give me this.
And what's the opposite of transactional? Relational. Are we transactional with God and even with one another and with each other, or is it really pure relational? Yeah.
So so that struck me since last week, and I've been pondering with that in my heart, because I really just want to do it for the sake of knowing him, for the sake of father and daughters, son and father relationship, you know. So before we pass it on to Russell, who's here in the house, and we're just going to welcome in a few minutes, I just want to leave that with you. And whatever Russell talks today about, please do think about, open your hearts to receive. What is it that, like Lucky said, that God has for you? You know, where is it that you are in this time right now? I think this time has been very revealing to see where our hearts are. You know, when Lucky and I have gone through hardships and difficult times in our life, in our marriage, in our relationship with our children. I mean, all the time, I know I look up to God and I wonder, where are you? Why are you doing this to me? Why not to them and why us? You know, what did we do wrong? Did I not fast enough? Did I not do the, again, transactional, you know, did I not do this enough?
Did I not read the Bible enough? Did I not fast enough? Did I not?
Was it because that day I didn't go to church?
I didn't give enough tithing. I mean, and if we're honest, well, we're trying to be honest, Giovanna and me. We think like this. And somebody did this to us. A father, mother, family of origin, society, culture, religion. And I think these are things we need to pray about, we need to think about, we need to talk about. And that's what we talk about every day at Hope4Life. Right now, we're in a different season of Hope4Life, and I can't wait to return to, though I'm enjoying this season, and we're doing it because we want all of you to be encouraged, instead of just giving the normal classes, which are wonderful, but to encourage each other and encourage one another in these times, you know. But even our attitudes towards relation, and what's the other word, is family of origin, transactional, you know.
So without
further ado, adieu,
let's welcome Pastor
Russell
Black.
Thank you, Russell, so very much for doing this.
So where is he?
Where is he? Where are you, Russell?
Right here. I'm right here.
Oh, okay. So everyone, let's welcome Pastor Russell Black. And like everyone that has come here, it's a gift and a privilege for all of us to be hearing all these amazing
voices,
people speak to us, speak to our lives. So with reverence and respect, you know, let's just hear what he has to bring to us this morning. So welcome, Russell. How are you?
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much. Thanks for this opportunity to be with you guys this morning. I feel like I'm amongst family, even though you guys don't get to see me very often. Saturdays are hard because my wife works really hard Monday through Friday, and sometimes I just feel like I need to be with her a lot on Saturdays. But even last week at the same time, and if you could see, I live on a 5-acre fruit grove here. I'm the only house in about 120 acres. So this stay-at-home thing has been challenging. So much the other day I got super excited when the UPS man showed up. Yeah, I mean, I greeted him. I wanted to go hug him, but he kind of kept his distance. He set the package down and walked away, you know. But literally, there's some days I don't see another human being except for my wife. So, but last week, I actually was in the meeting with you guys as I was spreading fertilizer at my grove. So you didn't see me. I didn't do my video, but I was listening to everything. And I want to tell everyone, especially anybody that doesn't join often, that this is one of the most amazing ministries that I know of today. Definitely in South Florida, very unique, very valuable. And for that reason, it's such an honor to be able to be with you guys today. Lives are getting transformed, and I just love the interaction, even through this means this morning. There's just a lot of love and respect amongst all you guys. And I think it's because of the great amount of openness and vulnerability in which you guys walk your lives every day. And it starts from the top. It starts with Giovanna and Lucky. And it's actually inspired me to be more and more open than I've ever been before. So thank you. Thank you for including me amongst incredible giants that you guys have here. Some of them have been influencers of mine as well. And, you know, Jack Frost probably is in the top 5 most influential people to me and my wife. I had the great privilege of getting to know him a little bit, spending time with him, talking to him when he was still alive, and even going to Shiloh Place when my wife and I needed a a tune-up about 15 years ago after we built a house together. We went out there. I called Jack one day and said, Jack, my wife's really having a hard time with me. So do you know where I could go? You have any idea where we could go to get some help, you know? And he says, that's exactly what we're about. So he you know, arranged for us to go up there, and it was just an incredible thing. So, so anyway, it's great to be here with you guys this morning. I want to ask Gigi that anytime you want to take a pause or want to do anything, you just interrupt me at any time. But I'm going to just try to flow here this morning. I want to tell you that just getting ready for this opportunity to speak with you guys this morning, I got so excited because I started reviewing the notes and studying and getting in the Word, and it built me up this morning. I hope that whatever I bring to you guys will build you guys up as well. I want to just give you a little background. My wife and I have been here. My wife's the head of the Chamber of Commerce here in South Dade. And that's after many years of being a missionary and a minister. She's back in the business world. And about almost 5 weeks ago, she was exposed to someone with coronavirus, one of her employees. You know, some days later, she got sick with it as well, and went through about 4 or 5 days of severe flu-like symptoms. I was here with her throughout the whole thing. Never got one symptom, thank God. And she recovered fairly quickly, never got a fever above 100 degrees. But we were already locked down here. So she's now 100% whole and healed and strong. And we just thank God for that. And but you know, these are very, very unique and interesting times in which we're living. You know, I've never seen anything like it, to be honest with you. But it's almost exciting. And for a long part of my life, I've always felt like I would be able to live in times like this, and actually with anticipation. Not that I like the suffering that happens, but because I believe that God created us to not to escape times like this, but to thrive in the midst of them. So I want to talk a little bit about thriving, not just surviving. And I believe the Christian life, the true victorious Christian life, isn't a life of survival, but it's a life of thriving. And it's not a life that we get saved, we get a ticket to heaven, and then we just hang on as best we can until we get on that ride to heaven. But actually, I'm totally convinced that God, in everything He's done, not only gives us eternal life, but He gives us life abundant life. And if we're not walking in abundant life, then we're missing out on all that God has for us. And I also believe that He doesn't save us just from something. He saves us unto something. He doesn't just save us from something, but He saves us unto something. So, you know, I think He created all of us to be in the midst of a situation like this, and not just to survive ourselves, but to also be used by Him as His hands and feet to help others get victory in the midst of it. And you know, one of the ways I travel extensively, I've had to cancel some big trips. I've been doing missions work. In August, it'll be 29 years. And I had a big trip to Peru for March and April that I had to cancel. I'd set up for 2 months for this trip, and even went down to Peru and set it up, and had to cancel it. And I had another trip to California, and you know, just had to be flexible in the midst of it. And I'm also very well connected with people in Colombia, Peru, Cuba, Dominican Republic, El Salvador, Spain, even Israel. And it's been really tough for me not to be there with them in the midst of this. So one of the things that I'm seeing that people are so hungry for is good news and encouragement. And so Gigi works with me part-time, and she's my social media coordinator amongst many other things. And she's always saying, give me something to put on social media. And half the time I was like, I don't even care about that. You know, I don't want to be, it's hard to be front and center in that. But I've found that people are hungry for hope. They're very hungry for hope. So just putting little messages that come from my time with God on Facebook, hope inspiring sayings, the people just gobble it up, and it's really needed. So I want to talk a little bit about hope. I want to talk a little bit about the goodness of God. And I also want to frame this in the context of a conversation that I had this week. Now, one of my closest friends, who is a great man of God and really one of my heroes, is a minister in Cuba. And so we were talking this week, and by the way, just a little testimony. God is moving around the world in amazing ways, greater than we could even imagine, even in the midst of this crisis. It's absolutely amazing. And actually, I've been concerned. I used to be a pastor. My wife and I were pastors of a church, and I was concerned for a lot of churches because, the truth of the matter is that money funds ministry, and a lot of churches, if people aren't in service in a church, they don't necessarily tithe. I mean, historically, in summertime, when people are away on vacations, is when a lot of churches suffer economically a lot, because people don't show up, they don't tithe. So I've been really concerned that if people aren't going to a church meeting, then there's going to be a lot of economic strife in churches. But I've heard multiple testimonies of pastors saying actually the giving in their church has increased. And many of them, even through these Zoom meetings, they said more people are showing up at these Zoom meetings that show up on the church day. So I don't know. I think a couple of things are happening. One is people are hungry for a relationship. And second, people are when the rug is pulled out from under people, people are grateful for things that they've previously took for granted. And three, I am extremely excited because I think God is setting us up for a powerful transformation and move of God in the midst of what we're seeing, and so my friend in Cuba, where things were already terrible before this, financially, economically, there's a lot of scarcity of food and basic supplies, no fuel. My friend just took it on himself as a national leader to begin to resource pastors all over the countryside to provide food for their neighbors. And so we were able to send a big offering down. Some other partners sent big offerings down. And so my friend was going around all around Cuba, just distributing food and funds. And these pastors in these villages and towns are preparing these big meals, inviting the whole community in. And in many cases, the government authorities, the communist authorities are thanking the pastors that are doing this for the people. They said, thank you for doing this, because they don't have the resources to do it. So I was talking to my friend about that the other day, and he told me this incredible testimony of going to deliver food to a village that was completely shut off because they had a real high a number of cases of coronavirus there. And the police wouldn't even let anybody close to him. So he said, I need to take some food to this guy. So he starts talking to this policeman. This is in Cuban communist country. The police are supposed to be anti-Christian and all of that. And he said, well, God bless you. And we said, God bless you. The guy said, Pastor, can I ask you a question? He said, is this the end of the world? Is this the end of the world? And my friend said, no, it's not the end of the world, but it's the judgment of God. It's the judgment of God. So that just caused me to start thinking and even writing this week. And so I want to talk a little bit about that too, because it's important. It's important in this time that, first of all, we see God as he truly is, because if we see him any differently, we're going to have a hard time when hard times come. We got to see God as he truly is, not some distorted view of who he is, but who he is and what he does and how he acts or if not, we're going to have a hard time when hard times come. There's a great writer and Christian leader of the early part of the 20th century. His name was A.W. Tozer. And if you ever get a chance to read some of his books, just the depth, the spiritual depth was amazing. And he wrote over 60 books. So this, and very respected. And he said this statement one time, and I think it's real important. He said, what comes into our minds when we think about God is the most important thing about us. What comes into our minds when we think about God is the most important thing about us.
And just so that everybody knows, I am putting the quotes that he's saying on the chat if everybody wants to see them.
Also, did you mute Michelle Revolta because she's moving around and phasing out?
So, and I really started thinking about this week is that all of us see God through the filters of our life experiences. And I think you guys talk about this a lot at Hope4Life, but I want to just take a few minutes for you guys to think about that. How do you view God when you think of God? When you just take a moment to really focus on who God is, what appears before you? How do you see him? And maybe another way to frame it is when you feel like you're failing God, how does he appear to you? When you feel like you've messed up, when you feel like you should have done something different, how does God appear to you? What does he look like? Because that's super, super important. And if we have that out of order, then it's going to affect everything we do. And one of my great friends and mentors told me something a couple years ago, and it just continues to ring true in me. He says, one of the greatest confrontations or battles in the coming years is going to be about the goodness of God. Is God good? And what does that mean? There's so many different ways to see God. Some people see him as a harsh judge, honestly, that's just waiting there to whack him over the head, to get you back in line. That he's the all-seeing, all-knowing God that knows everything. And the truth of the matter is sometimes we see ourselves so harshly, we can only imagine that God sees us that way as well. Some people might see God as very, very distant. That he's out there. I know he's there, but I don't really experience him. I don't feel him. I don't really think I hear him. Some people might see God like a guru, like somebody that everything's cool, everything's good all the time. He just loves me, and anything I do, it's okay and it's good. Some people might see God as like a Santa Claus figure. But the important thing is to see him as he is. And there's a lot of different things that come into our lives that that shape the way we see God. It can be our experience. I think one of the biggest ways is our relationship with our earthly father. I think I've shared this with you guys before, but this is something that I was confronted with really the first time I saw Jack Frost in Toronto, Canada. You know, I realized that in many ways I hadn't represented God well for my kids. So when we got back, we set our kids down and asked their forgiveness and humbly confessed to them our failings and we also as well told them how much we loved them and how important and valuable they were to us, and that from now on we wanted to represent the Father better because we had come to know the Father in a better way, you know. And so a lot of us see God, especially God in the form of the Father, according to the example we've had as an earthly father. And also we're shaped by the teachings that we've been under, you know. A lot of us have been under teachings that probably were taught by people that didn't have a very healthy view of who God is either. So we have to walk through that, and it's a tough journey. But so in all of that, if we had a judgmental father in our natural life, or an absent father, we're going to see God is sort of absent, not involved in our everyday life, and also judgmental, very hard to please, hard to satisfy in even in our very best behavior or best days. And also sometimes we have our view of who the Father is based on some stories from the Old Testament, the way God dealt with people in the time before the coming of Jesus. And we also view those stories sometimes out of context. So it's so important to see the context in God's dealing with his people, and in a clear and healthy context, because there's one thing I'm absolutely convinced about is God is perfect. He never makes a mistake, and he is always good, and he always is perfect. So whatever he's done in the past, he did with a perfect purpose, perfect reason. And we need to discover what that is. You know, even at times when in the Old Testament, God came across in a way that we would seem very harsh today, we have to discover the context in which that harshness came. You know, time and time again, in the harshest places, he was dealing with the most evil people that have ever lived on the face of the earth. You know, and he hated that evil that was behind them, their behavior, you know. And in other times, before the finished work of Christ, he had to bring attention to people that were blinded and asleep and lackadaisical and lethargic. And so in that time, just to awaken the people, he came across what we'd seen kind of harsh. But we have to understand that what his expression towards human race was like in the Old Testament is totally changed because of the finished work of Jesus in the way he relates to us today. The Bible says in Hebrews 10, it says that Jesus rectified and sealed a new covenant with us through his blood. So before Jesus, there was out of the righteousness of God, there was a need for justice. There was a need for judgment on the human race. Uh, but Jesus came and he paid the price. He became the last sacrifice. All through the Old Testament, and the way I like to frame it is it's studying through the Old Testament is where is Jesus, the future Jesus, the person of Jesus in every story, in every circumstance, and time and time again, in God's dealings with the human race, there Jesus was right in the middle of it. He was setting us up. He is setting up the human race for the coming of Jesus and the change that would take place. I believe the greatest moment in all of creation was the resurrection of Jesus. The greatest moment was the resurrection of Jesus. You know, in the Bible even says that we were with him in all that he went through. We were with him on the cross. We were with him in the grave, and we were with him in the resurrection. We even see that in the modern water baptism, that we go under one way and we come out a different way. We are dead, buried, and resurrected with him. And it says that when Jesus came out of it through his resurrection, he came with the keys to death and hell in his hands. And what does that mean? It means that he recaptured all that was lost. And what was lost was the authority and dominion that God had given to the human race at the beginning of creation, that Adam and Eve had given over to Satan through their disobedience. And he recovered that. He recovered that once and for all. And he then says that he gave those keys, the keys to the kingdom, to his children, to his body, to his church. And so another exciting way to look at it is the day in the moment that he died on the cross and crucified, that the veil was torn from top to bottom. And that veil was this very, very thick textile woven fabric that some people says was several inches thick, that separated inside the temple the holy place from the Holy of Holies. And in the Holy of Holies is where the presence of God dwelt. And only one person per year could go behind that veil, behind that curtain. And it was the high priest. And the high priest would have to go through this whole sacrificial ritual just to be able to atone or to take the place of the sins of the people before he could even be possibly fit to go into that Holy of Holy places. And it was a scary place. You know, it was a place where the holiness of God was so powerful that it would kill anything that was natural and fleshly. And they literally had to tie bells to the border of the hem of the garment of the high priest, and they tied a cord around his ankles, so that when he went in there to meet with the presence of God once a year behind the veil, behind the curtain, as long as he was alive, they could hear the bells ringing. And if they ever had a long period of time that the bells stopped ringing, they knew that he was probably dead, and they could pull him out with the cord around his ankle. I mean, that's some serious stuff. And I believe that God is that powerful, and he is that holy, and he's that worthy to be revered and to be respected and to be loved. But this is the amazing thing. When Jesus died on the cross, the veil was ripped from top to bottom. Humanly possible, it was impossible to tear this. And it was even more so impossible to do it from the top to the bottom. If it had said it was ripped from the bottom to the top, you could think some people got in there and pulled on it real hard and ripped it. It was ripped from the top to the bottom. And from that day forward, there was no separation between God and man, because of Jesus Christ, because of what he did. And so that scary place of the presence that no one could go into, it was such a radical change on a universal level that that separation was removed from that day forward. And now we, through the blood of Jesus and through Jesus as our great high priest, we have access directly to God. We can go straight into the Holy of Holies. And it's even greater than that. Not only that, but that holy temple that his holiness and his presence lived in is now inside of us as believers. We are transformed into the temple of God, into the temple of God. So why do I say all that? To say that there's a closeness that we can have with God that is almost hard to grasp at times, but it's very hard to receive when we don't even feel like God likes us, that he loves us, that he wants to be. I don't know about you, but
Can you
for
repeat that
years,
also? It's very
yeah.
hard to receive. Can you repeat what you just said? It's very hard to receive.
Yes, it's really hard to receive that revelation of really even what I just shared. If we still have a hard time with the basics of understanding that we are, because of Jesus, we are acceptable to God. He not only loves us, but he absolutely delights in us. You know, it's and for me, for a long time, I could preach up a storm about the love of God, that God loved everyone else, but it was hard for me at times to love myself and to believe that God loved me, and much less that he liked me, you know, because I didn't like myself. Because I knew who I was, or at least who the enemy had convinced me that I was, you know. And so it's so important that we ask him to continually show us who he is and what he's like. And so I got a couple of verses that have really helped me with this. The first one is in Hebrews chapter 1. Hebrews chapter 1, verse 2 and 3. Hebrews chapter 1, verses 2 and 3. So I want to frame this in the way that we have God as his expression of himself throughout the Old Testament, you know. And generally speaking, we have a concept that God in the Old Testament, on a general sense, was somewhat harsh, somewhat hard to please, demanding and stuff. I would debate that as well, because just as many times as he seemed to appear that way, he also appeared very, very loving and very compassionate, quick to forgive and slow to anger, time and time again. But generally, especially us that have a long-term Christian background, we see God of the Old Testament in that sense. But here it's interesting. In the book of Hebrews was directed towards the Jewish people of the day. So everything that's in the book of Hebrews was written so that the Hebrews of that day could begin to understand who Jesus was and how radical his reformation was in the way that we need to see God, the way that God really is. And it starts off, and you see it right from the very first. It says in Hebrews 1, verse 2, it says, "In these last days has spoken to us in his Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, through whom he made the world." So what it's saying, let me back up to verse 1. God, after he spoke long ago to the fathers in the prophets in many portions and in many ways. So it starts off by saying God in the past spoke to us and told us who he was through the leaders, the prophets, in many portions, in many ways. But in these last days, he has spoken to us in his Son. It's a lot different for God to reveal himself through somebody else, but it's a much more powerful thing for God to reveal himself through himself, because Jesus is God, and he existed before he existed on the earth, and he continues to exist today. He's the co-creator. It's not, it's kind of a mystery and sometimes complicated to think through, but Jesus, even though he came as a human being, born as a child in the womb of a woman, he existed before that, and for all eternity past, he existed. He co-created the earth with the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. But then he came to earth, not being represented by humans talking about him, but he came to earth representing himself in the form of a human being. And in the second part of verse 2, it says, whom he appointed heir of all things, through whom also he made the world. So there it shows it right there that Jesus existed before, and he was the creator along with the Father and the Holy Spirit. And then listen to this, in verse 3 it says, and he is the radiance of his glory in the exact representation of his nature. He upholds all things by the word of his power. When he had made purification of sins, he sat down the right hand of the majesty on high. So what in this verse 3, what it's saying in essence is that Jesus Christ, in everything he has presented himself as, the way he lived his life, the way he ministered, the way he dealt with people, he is the radiance, the very shine of God himself, and he is the exact representation of his nature. He's the exact representation of nature. So this is the way I see it. And this is what we need to learn. It helps us to frame who God is. Jesus Christ is perfect theology. Jesus Christ is perfect theology. So, I'm not a theologian. I like understanding and doctrine and all that kind of stuff, but sometimes theology bogs me down because there's so much, it's so complicated. I want to just boil it down to something very simple. Jesus Christ is perfect theology. If you don't see it in the life, in the acts, in the ministry of Jesus, then you have every right to say that's not God. He's the perfect representation of who God is. He is God, and he was God. And as he lived on the earth, everything he did, the way he dealt with people, the way he treated people, the way he loved people, the way he healed people, even the moments where the way he rebuked people, he was a perfect representation of who God is. So it just helps me a lot when I'm thinking through the images sometimes I have from the Old Testament. Where was Jesus in that? And what was his? I don't think God ever changes, but I do believe that he adjusted the way he had dealt with us as a human race, and I think he always did it with absolute perfect love. And so I've seen this so many times, and I wrote a little thing about it. Is COVID-19 the judgment of God? Is it, even though my best friend who I love and learn from so much said that, I don't agree with it in that context, that this is, about 3 or 4 years ago, I was in Peru on the mission trip, and for 2 months before I got there had been these terrible mudslides and rivers of water that washed through communities and killed people, tore down their homes, and it was just a horrible thing. And we showed up a couple of weeks after the last one, and we took supplies up into these really poor communities that people were literally, their houses were in rubble, and they're sleeping out on the street, on the corner in front of them, in just horrible, horrible conditions. And and we just went in there and started loving on people. And it just broke my heart how many of those people said, this is the judgment of God on us. This is what God has done to us, and we deserve it, you know? And they really were convinced of that, because someone had shaped God in that image to them, that these natural phenomenons that had happened there and been so destructive, that's who God was to them, because that's what they've been told. And we had the great privilege of saying, that's not right. He actually loves you. And look how we are his hands and feet. We're loving on you. We're praying for you. We started praying for people that were sick and had pain in their bodies, and God started healing people, started raising them up, and just through our love, we began to say a different thing. And time again, whenever a big natural disaster happens, people start saying, this is the judgment of God. Is this the judgment of God? When a hurricane hits, when a forest fire happens, when an earthquake or a tsunami, or even, I don't know how many of you guys remember when 9/11 happened, how many people said, is this the judgment of God? Does he hate our nation this bad? Is this going to be the beginning of some really harsh times? And it's not, it comes from a place of not knowing who God is. And I want to frame that as well. And, you know, we can get into a long theological discussion, but there will be a judgment. There is a judgment that's coming, but I don't think it's like we've always thought it would be. You know, one of the great men of God alive today is a guy named Mike Bickle, who I've followed for 30 years. And he says, the judgment of God is always focused and directed towards whatever separates us from his love. How about framing it that way? The judgment of God is always focused and directed towards whatever separates us from his love.
Did you all hear that? It's very important you all hear this line. It's whatever separates us from his love, not from his anger. Thank you, Russell. Sorry, I just had to
Yeah.
that. Because,
You know, one of my spiritual fathers, a guy named Bill Johnson, he says that he feels like the end time judgment that so many people are really afraid of. They, you know, a lot of people, when they think of that, they just live in absolute terror. You know, he says that end time judgment in his heart, and this is a guy that knows God unbelievably well. He said, I believe it's going to be directed against all of the demons who have tormented and destroyed people's lives for all of these thousands of years. They deserve an absolute the wrath of God to come upon them. You know, so. Let me just frame this as well about Jesus. If you really, and I've studied this a lot, if you begin to look at how Jesus dealt with people in his time, something very interesting happened. He was absolutely harsh and strong. I guess you could say harsh in a sense against every person and institution that was arrogant in their self-righteousness. You know, he came down pretty hard a lot of times on the religious leaders of his day, especially those that thought they knew everything and there was nothing to learn, and that he was wrong. He was pretty strong with them. And some of the we see sometimes Jesus is meek and mild and sort of like a hippie like figure walking around. Let me tell you, my vision of Jesus, first of all, he was a construction worker. You know, I think he was probably pretty fit, and he was strong, and his hands working. You know, in the day, a carpenter, we think of a carpenter as someone that makes furniture. In his day, most likely he was a home builder. He was a building builder. I mean, he was strong. He had to move big timbers, and he probably had rough hands, and he probably had pretty fit physique in many ways. But some of the pictures we have is he just meek and mild, kind of like a hippie with a bandana around his head. You know, I think he was powerful. He was serious, but he was he oozed with love. People would just look into his eyes and they would melt by the love that he poured out. But when he came across someone in some institution, or someone who was influencing someone that caused them to either draw back away from God or not feel worthy to come to God, he was pretty ruthless. He was pretty ruthless. But time and time again, when he encountered someone who was struggling with sin, with bondages in their lives, with mindsets that were wrong, but at least they were open, he had the deepest tenderness you could ever imagine, time and time again. And it totally shocked the religious leaders, even many of the people that followed him and agreed with him. It shocked them because they had never seen a religious leader treat people that way, with compassion, with tenderness, and always wanting to help them and always trying to lift them up time and time again. So Jesus Christ is perfect theology. If you don't see it in the life, in the works and the teachings of Jesus, then you have every right to say, I'm seeing things incorrectly. Because right there it says, he is the radiance of his glory and the exact representation of his nature. So when I see people so ready to call every tragedy or crisis, maybe this is the judgment of God, it causes me to think that that's probably not a good way for us to represent who he is, you know, because the truth of it is, going back to my situation in Peru, there were wonderful, godly people who lost everything as well, you know. And where does it stop when we start attributing everything that's bad to God? I mean, even today, we've come up with a term that's used in society called acts of God. You know, a tree falls on your car, and that's not an accident, that's an act of God. You know, we even do that so many times there. So I think we're going to take a little break, and I want to come back and talk along those lines. And also, if anybody has some questions that this has brought up, we can deal with those as well.
Well, thank you, Russell. There's so much to chew on here. For me personally, I was thinking how I had an absent father all my life. I had no father. So for me, it was very difficult to see God as a present father. I mean, it took me almost 40 years. And then the representation of fathers around me, the men, the elders, they were abusive. So whenever I saw the story of Jesus Christ, and I didn't understand, like you said, the context, when I saw context of how Jesus he's being crucified, and he says, Father, why have you abandoned me or forsaken me? I had no context when I saw that. So for me, it was like, aha, I knew it. You see, God, the Father, abandons us. And as you were speaking today, I was thinking, wow, how beautiful that we get to really understand context, so that we remove all those lies, all those things that I've been carrying so many lies through the years. I mean, it's not really anybody's fault. It's just what it's been. So thank you so much. Thank you so much. Giorgio, I would like to invite you to come on board and do your
I
message.
am. Yeah, thank you, Gigi. Russell, thank you, man. This is beautiful what you're speaking. I mean, I'm looking at the comments and I see people saying this is exactly what my heart needed this morning. You know, there's a lot of people being touched as you speak. When we talk about the judgments, I grew up in a conditional home, and I grew up because I live in a conditional society. So it was only normal for conditionality to be present in my life. But that conditionality was always tied up to goodness and meanness. If I did well, then I would get good things. If I did bad, then I would get bad things. And it has been shown to me, in my walk, that the more that I mature in my emotional setup and in my spiritual connection with this vertical relationship that I have with my Father, I have realized that this conditionality does not exist in my life with Him and His life with me. There is an amazing amount of love that I feel today. There is an amazing amount of joy that I receive today, independent of whether I am doing well in my life or whether I'm not doing well in my life, whether I'm doing the right thing or whether I am falling in the same places time and again. It's very easy for most of us to judge and point the finger at the easy targets, addicts, people who use violence to express themselves, bullies. But when we look at ourselves in the mirror, or when we look at ourselves in those moments of deepening, of introspection, of time alone with God, of meditation, whatever you want to call it, this is where the true relationship starts. I continue to fall. We all continue to fall daily. We lie, petty lies. We focused on what people are saying to find faults on what they're telling us, and we're quick to say, that's not right, that's not this, that's not that. We're quick to try to put ourselves on top of the pyramids of people, and the reality is there is absolutely no need to do that. This is when we're living away from God, when we're trying to judge and measure what everyone else is saying or doing or behaving like. This is when we start losing touch with this vertical relationship that we have. To me, Hope4Life has been instrumental in showing me this vertical relationship. Not because they have read, yes, the classes are amazing. The small groups are incredibly satisfying and rewarding. There's no question about that. And I think that most people who are in this chat, in this class today, will agree with me. We know that is where a lot of things happen. But, it is in the understanding that we are wanted. I am wanted. In this walk with God that I have learned to do here, nowhere, anywhere have I ever been told that I can be doing drugs and God still loves me. They told me, yes, God loves you through all the problems and through all the struggles, but eventually, something has to happen, right? And we try hard, and it doesn't happen because we're not getting this. We're just so focused on trying to please as opposed to trying to receive His love that we lose sight of the real thing, And Hope4Life has been instrumental in showing me this verticality, not because of the teachings, but because of the people who are leading it. For so many years, I've had this hatred for men. Yeah, I have this misandry, I think is the term. Is that right, Lucky?
Oh yeah, very good. Very good.
The way that I was raised to respect authority. The way that I was raised was to respect authority because authority implemented fear as one of its main tenets of getting that authority through. there's a consequence for not respecting authority. So when I was growing up, that extreme authoritative figure that was in the picture of in the image of my father, who was doing his best, his loving best to raise me properly, just had the opposite effect. It just had the effect of me just drawing away from that. And then the image of that authority represented on my father went out, extrapolated into the image of all men. So, you know, I rejected all things that had to be with authority and rules and regulations, you know. But being in this ministry, understanding as I developed a relationship with a man like Lucky, who's definitely, I mean, he has his own set of issues like we all do, but it was about looking beyond these things and understanding what is behind whatever it is that we are not very functional with, you know, and in his loving ways and in his kindness. And I'm sure that a lot of people are sort of like laughing a little bit, because there is nothing kind about being direct with what is going on in our lives. And like he has shown that to me, but he has shown it to me in a loving way and in a very, very upfront way as well. And that's hard to do, you know. So I've been in this ministry for 8 years, you know, and what he has shown to me the most, and I want to share the screen with you quickly, if I may. This is a beautiful quote for me. There's an element of what Gandhi was talking about there, which is about kindness, you know, gentleness. How are we living that? You know, we come to these places here and we gather enough inside of us that we're full of the Spirit when this ends, but then we walk away, you know, until the next Saturday, and we live our lives in a vacuum thinking that everything is going to be okay. And when it's not, then we always have this. And yes, I do have this. I've had this for 8 years, you know, but it takes a monumental effort, guys, to make this happen for 8 years. And to make this happen every single weekend the way it's happening, you know. During this time, during this quarantine, during these moments of isolation, we would think that there would be a lot of things that are going on that lessens the amount of money that we're spending, you know. And you would think we're not using the physical brick and mortar establishment of Hope4Life in Beth Orb, but that continues to be a rent. You know, rent goes on regardless, you know. So there are things that continue. And on top of that, we've established this Zoom meetings so that we can reach all of you, so that we can be with all of you, so that I can be with all of you. This is important for me as well, you know. And this is not, I mean, we're not paying a penny for this. All of you here, we're accessing this at no cost, but there is a cost involved in making this happen the way it is happening. All bucks aside, yeah, all those things that we just saw, you know. But you know, it costs money to run this. It costs money to have everything happen. And I was just talking to a friend of mine not too long ago, and he was telling me that because I've gone to a couple of you know, conferences outside of Miami that are part of what I've learned at Hope4Life, and he was telling me, oh, I want to go there, you know, this is amazing. And I told him a little bit about the cost, and he was willing, you know. It's expensive. It's over $1,000 in some of the things that, you know, things are done. The way that things are done, they cost over $1,000 in some cases, you know, travel, expenses, you know, the registration fee, all of these things add up eventually. But then I invited him to come to Hope4Life, and he said, how much do I have to pay? You know? And I said, no, there's no cost. And he came once, and I called him and I spoke to him and I asked him, so what do you think? He said, yeah, I like it, but you know, it's not for me. He said, how come it's not for you? Well, you know, I don't agree with the things that they say. So forget about the things that they say. You know, what is it telling to your heart? You know, let's not look at the things that are being said here with a judgmental eye. Let's look at the things that are being said in here with a heart that wants to receive something that has never heard before and has never felt before. In other words, I am being taught here to let go. I am being taught here to understand something a little bit different, not because what I'm doing is wrong, but because this is something totally different that is going to help me understand a lot of the things that I've done wrong. That's the big difference. So he didn't want to. I said, you know, we could use, in my own way, I told him, you know, we could use your help, you know, we could really use your help at the ministry. He said, yeah, well, you know, he never gave, you know. So he was willing to give at a conference and travel outside of Miami and fly and spend all that money, but he was not willing to help here. Why? And I think I know why. I mean, when I look at the things, it was himself traveling to a place and what's going to be the benefit for him. Here, when you give here, there's nothing here for you and you alone. When you give here, you're helping everyone that is in this room continue the healing process. And this is the big difference, yeah? It's easy, again, to give. Let me repeat it again. You go outside and you travel and you spend for yourself all those hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars sometimes, you know, and we get something out of that and we come back and we say, this was beautiful, but it's not helping anybody else. Here, when you give, you're helping somebody else. You're helping everyone that is in this room continuing the healing process. And what can be more wonderful than to continue this healing process with people like us? Yeah, not a cult, not a system, it's just a community. You know, and when I am talking to people that have things in common with me, those are true friendships, you know, emotional setups, not material things, not this horizontal relationship with the world. I'm talking about sharing things born out of the vertical relationship that I have learned to live here in this ministry. So, you know, when we talk about giving, I know it's difficult. We're going through difficult times. There's no question about it. Most everybody has been affected one way or another. You know, but so if you're going through a hard time, it's okay, man. Don't, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry. Don't give. It's okay, man. We get it. We understand, and we'll try to help. This is what we're doing this, so that in those moments of difficulties that you're going through, we're here for you.
And I'm going to share the screen while you finish up, Giorgio.
Right. So, and it's too bad that, you know, the system crashed, so we couldn't do anything else, but I had a couple of other things. But anyways, but if you can give, again, that quote from Gandhi, you know, what is in your heart? You know, what is in our hearts? What is preventing us from giving? You know, and when we look at ourselves, it's usually us and us alone. There's nothing else impeding us. There's nothing else stopping us from giving but us. You know, when we see people on the street and they're asking for money and we feel like giving, this is true giving, you know, and then we think, nah, he's going to drink. And then we stop. We're not the drunk people, mind you, but it's the same process that goes through in those who want to give to the ministry. Maybe they think, I do want to give, I do feel great about giving, but then they think twice. No, I got to do this, I got to do that. I'd rather do this, I'd rather go there. You know, stop. Think and take action on that first moment of generosity that your vertical relationship told you to take on and give, you know. And this is not a pointing moment, you know, a finger pointing moment. This is just us being in contact. This is just us. I'm just calling everyone to be in vertical relationship right now and think about what your heart is telling you. I think this is what is important. This is what we're getting here in this ministry. Nothing else matters to me, to be honest. So there you have it. We have you can give by, you have all the information. Gigi, maybe you're much better at this than I am. You can give at 45777. Most of the people who attend Hope4Life use this method of giving. You can, you know, you type in the amount of money that you want to give, separated by a space, followed by the word hope. We also have Cash App, PayPal, and for those of you who attend the ministry at the brick and mortar place, you and use the envelopes. If you continue to want to use the envelopes, stop one checking one envelope and send it to Hope4Life of 11715 Southwest 87th Avenue. You have the address there.
I would like to also thank everybody who has been, a lot of you have been texting me, asking me on how to give, how much to give, what's good, what's bad. Oh, I forgot the text number. What is it, please? So I just want to thank all of you for your generosity. And I want to pray that this moment of giving becomes contagious for all of us, because it's really, if we believe that God provides, then it's going to happen. And I think that we have all seen the results of being in community, being in this awareness of who God is and how much He loves us and how He can heal us. Most people here go to different churches, and our idea is that as you heal and you become more into the image of Jesus, that you go into your churches with that healing, and that you can continue your growth, your spiritual growth. So this is not just you're not just giving to Hope for Life, but as you give financially here and we all spiritually and emotionally grow, we're all going into our communities, into our families, into our neighborhoods, into our churches, into our places of work, and we're going to be transforming the lives of those around us. So Father, we thank you for this beautiful opportunity for us to give, to be generous, to love one another. We thank you for giving us an opportunity to even be part of this. No amount is too much or too little. It's all yours anyway. So we thank you for giving us a heart and a mind like yours that wants to give, not just to ourselves, but to others generously. And it doesn't matter the amount. You know what's in our hearts. And some of us wish we could give thousands and thousands of dollars. And hopefully you will give us that chance, Father. So we thank you for all the blessings and the offerings, and may you multiply them, not just at Hope for Life, but in everybody's life, in every household today. In Jesus' name.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
May I say something? It's
One sec.
Carolina. Can I share something
Sure.
regarding giving? I find it amusing and beautiful how Pastor Russell, hello, it's Carolina from Colombia. The second phrase you said today was that God is a life of thriving and it's an abundant life. So if we could focus our giving to Hope for Life from that vision, from that point of view, it's an abundant life. We're all struggling now. We know this. We all have, like I've shared in groups, I have lost my job, but that's what's happening. But still, I come from this abundant vision of my life. So it's not that, like, let's make sure that I'm covered and then I give what is left over, if I may, what lo que sobra, you know, what's left. No, it has to come first. And that's the cycle of abundance, and that's the law of attraction. I wanted to share that with everybody.
Thank you, Carolina. That's beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, and Lucky and I truly would want to thank all of you that have been so generous and continue to give. Like Gigi, also, we have been getting texts and people asking alternative ways of giving. So thank you very much. We appreciate this. And as we continue with Pastor Russell,
Can
I wanted to.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
A lot of you, when you give, you're all very generous. I don't want to mention names because I've been told not to mention names. So we want to thank you. We're very grateful and you're very generous. And all this is about not hoarding, which was a class a couple of weeks ago, and about just being generous and grateful and grateful. And on that note, last week I gave my phone number to everyone. If anybody needs paper towels, toilet paper, hand sanitizer, emergency, oregano oil, colloidal silver, food. We've been also getting a lot of texts and phone calls asking us if we can help with that, and we have been. So yeah, give, take, and I hate that attitude. I mean, Giovanna and me have been more busier. I've spent more time on the phone in the last 4 weeks talking to people than I have in 5 years. I wake up on the phone and I go to sleep on the phone, and it's our pleasure. And that's one of the things we have to give, because it's not just the classes, it's not just the support groups. A lot of the breakthroughs for people come when Giovanna and me do the one-on-ones. Now we're doing it on Zoom, and it's working sweetly. Actually, I'm almost beginning to enjoy this too much not to have to go to a building, which I'm not, which I have to be careful, you know. I mean, I get up and do what I want, and I go to sleep, and I just, so, you know, it's about kinship. It's about sharing. It's about taking care of one another. It's about love, you know, and when you all give, every penny you guys give goes back into the ministry. I don't drive a Ferrari. I don't live in Pinecrest. And we give. So thank you all. And if you all need something, again, text us and call us. Even if you just need to talk, call us and text us. That's what I want to say.
Thank you.
Because this is a very important time for us to take care of one another, you know. Very important.
Thank you, Lucky. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
One of the things, Russell, before we went on this break, one of the questions that popped up, and I think it was from Jose Azaret, he said, why is God allowing, so why some people say, why is God allowing this? So that to happen. So this was his question.
Let me see. Where is Russell? Let
You're
me see.
muted.
You're Russell. You're muted, Russell.
All right, I'm back. I'm back. Good, good. That was one of the things I was going to address, but I'll pick on that in just a second, but I want to just finish up on talking about acts of God, because this is important to learn. And one of the things I've observed in life is that many times God is blamed for what the enemy does, and the enemy gets credit for what God does. And that's when things get really kind of crazy. How can I say that? Well, just like the acts of God, that all of these different things that happen, the tragedies, that he gets blamed for them as though it was his will. And that will lead in a minute to the other part about what is God's will. But at the same time, sometimes when God moves powerfully and in a unique way that we don't quite understand, when God brings a revelation that goes counter to what most people have learned, it's amazing how quickly people attribute that to the enemy. You know, in other words, things that actually, when you really judge them by their fruit, they bring life and they bring freedom and they bring hope. You know, I remember many years ago when I first moved here to Homestead, my wife's best friend walked across the street, and she was from a traditional church background, and but she was hungry. She had really just come to the Lord a couple years earlier, and she was visiting, and my co-pastor from Atlanta was down getting ready to go to on a trip with me. And she came over, and God was just moving in our midst in a big way. And so he prayed for her, and she fell on the ground, you know, and literally we had to kind of help her slowly go down the ground. If not, she would have just fallen flat like that. And when she got up, she was speaking in tongues. You know, I know that might shock some of you guys, and I don't want to get into all that so much, but I will tell you this, the fruit of all that was, this guy and I left, we went to Cuba for 2 weeks. And when we came back, my wife said, those 2 weeks were the greatest 2 weeks of this woman's life, that she was so connected to God. She was praying like never before. She was so full of joy. And she really didn't know what happened. We weren't trying to knock people over. We're not trying to get them to speak in tongues. It just, God touched her, and that's what happened. And about 4 weeks after it happened, she went and talked to one of her spiritual leaders in her church. And And her spiritual leader, she told him first, she said, listen, I'm going to tell you what happened to me at Russell and Carrie's house. And I want you to know, if you say anything against them, I'm out of here, because I trust them. And he said, well, I'm not going to say anything against them, but what happened to you was one of two things. It was either the flesh or it was the devil. So I mean, it's amazing. Something that brought some, and after that, it was like someone threw a wet blanket on her that took years to come off. She felt almost immediately disconnected with God and all that. So we got to be careful that we don't attribute to God what the enemy's doing or what just nature happens in nature, and we don't call what God does what the devil's doing. So anyway, I wanted to talk about that. So let's go to if God is sovereign, like I truly believe he is, why do so many terrible things happen? And this is important. And it's a point of a lot of theological discussion, that there's a lot of confusion, I believe, out there. I'll just say this, that I believe in the sovereignty of God. I believe that God is above and superior to all things at all times. But I believe that he's self-limiting. It's not that he is limited, but in certain areas, he decided to limit himself for divine purpose. So that leads us to consider, does everything that happens, is everything that happens the will of God? You know, and we need to understand that, because a lot of people use it as an excuse not to come to God. They use the excuse that if God is who he says he is, then I don't like him because he allows all these horrible things to happen, you know. And the truth of the matter is that I'm convinced that the reason bad things happen is because his people aren't doing what they're supposed to do. I believe that God has given us the tools and the authority to make a difference, and to stand up and to use even our spiritual authority and say, not on my watch, not in this time will I accept this. We've seen storms, literally storms, even hurricanes turn and go in a different direction because the people of God stood up and prayed, and they didn't just beg God to do it, but they stood up and said, not on my watch. This isn't going to happen. This isn't going to come here. We've also seen that sometimes the hurricane hits. It's a mystery. I don't understand it sometimes, but you know, there's a lot of things that God limited himself in as he trains us and gives us places of authority and responsibility. And it's not his fault that things are the way they are. It's our fault as his sons and daughters. You know, there's a Bible verse, I believe it's Psalms 115:13. It says, the heavens are the heavens of the Lord, but he has given the earth to the sons of men. The heavens are the heavens of the Lord, of Jehovah, but he's given the earth to the sons of men. Let me see, make sure that's Psalm. It's 115:16. Psalm 115:16. The heavens are the heavens of the Lord, but the earth he has given to the sons of men. So to me, that's one of the things that, listen, God dwells in heaven and he's sovereign over the earth, but he's limited himself in that he's allowed mankind to possess and to steward the earth and all that happens in it. And so I'm convinced that it's not his will that many of the things on this earth that happen. It would never be his will for murders and corruption and rapes and all of those horrible things that happen, child abuse, sexual abuse. He limits himself in those places for a reason. And he ultimately, I believe he's training us as his sons and daughters to begin to enforce his will, in a sense that, listen, it goes back to Matthew chapter 6 in the El Padre Nuestro, what do you call it? The Lord's Prayer. In the Lord's Prayer, it says, may your kingdom come, may your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. May your kingdom come. And Jesus was teaching his disciples, how do we pray? And he showed them what to pray and how to pray and what the focus of the prayer was. And the focus was that everything in heaven would be here on earth. And what's not in heaven would not take place here on earth, you know? So our prayer, and as we learn to walk out, you know, the Christian life that he has for us in our authority, our prayer in our work is that whatever is in heaven would be here on earth. And whatever is not in heaven wouldn't be here on earth. You see? So this is the way I pray. I say, God, right now there's sickness, there's fear, there's confusion. Because of that, there's poverty, there's chaos, but that doesn't exist in heaven. So it shouldn't exist on earth. It's unjust that it's here on earth. So I start praying everything that I see on the earth, I begin to pray the opposite. But I pray from the position of heaven towards earth. And I say, where there's sickness, I say, I pray that there be health and there be wholeness. That where there's poverty, I pray, God, that you would come through with incredible provision, that you would show that in heaven there's abundance and there's prosperity, and that you have more than enough for every single human being to live with provision and not suffer lack and not suffer starvation, you know. And you know, one of the things that I think a lot of people struggle with along those lines is it God's will that someone gets healed? You know, when is it God's will and when is it not God's will? And because I know, you know, I've been praying for the sick for 30 years, and I've seen a lot of people dramatically healed instantaneously, and I've seen some not change at all at the same time. And so I've shared those testimonies with some people, and they say, well, when do you know if it's God's will? Well, I did a deep study, and I believe it's always God's will for people to be healed. And people struggle with that sometimes. They say, well, why aren't people healed then if it's God's will? And I said, well, it's his will, but sometimes I have to live in the mystery. I don't understand it. You know, even this morning, as I was sharing what I was going to speak about to Carrie, my wife, I said, you know, we walked through years ago watching a hero, a giant in the faith, Jack Frost, get diagnosed with cancer, and you know, surrounded by some of the most powerfully used people of God on the face of the earth today. People have seen incredible miracles. The blind eyes open, and deaf ears pop open, and cancer's falling off people, and they prayed for him, and he got prayer, and you know, he lost the battle and he died, you know. So was it God's will? I personally don't think it was. I think it happened, but it wasn't God's will. Why did it happen? I don't know, but I can live in the mystery of it. But one thing I've learned is that I can't focus on the battle that was lost for Jack when I'm praying for someone else that's in the same battle. In other words, I can't be focused on something that didn't happen when I need something to happen, you know. And we're kind of seeing that right now. And this is one of the ways my wife and I have learned to go through struggles and battles, is that this sickness that we're going through, that she went through, is one of many that we've faced over the years in ministry, living in different countries, in different circumstances. Times that we didn't have any money to go to a doctor, and there wasn't any doctor anywhere around us, you know. We had to learn to fight through it. And how do we do that? So, you know, even when we started hearing about this horrible disease where, you know, very healthy people are just getting it and 2 or 3 days later dying, and people are suffocating, and people are you know, having such hard times, and the number of deaths just keeps going up and up all over the world. What do we do when all of a sudden my wife is sick? You know, what we've learned to do, and this is what we learned over time, is that we focus on what God's doing and what his word says, and we can glance at what's happening around us, but we take our focus off that, you know. And one of the things, and this is the same, listen, if God can heal people of their emotional issues, and I think that's why a lot of us are here for Hope for Life. We came with deep emotional issues, deep wounds, deep circumstances, and we have a lot of faith, especially for other people, that God can heal them up, and we've seen the testimonies of it. He does the exact same thing, and we don't ever think that it's not his will for someone to be healed up emotionally, right? It's the same will that people be healed up physically. So
Russell, can I say something?
yeah.
One of the lines that Wayne Jacobson, when he was here, said that stuck to me, and it was very powerful, and goes along the lines of what you're saying, that we stay in the mystery. You know, we there's some things that we just don't, and we just trust it, because again, we trust this nature, we trust God's nature. But one of the things Wayne used to said when he was here, he said this line, and I love it. He says, trusting him, trusting God, trusting the Father, no matter what, it's far better than trusting the outcome we want. And I think that goes along the lines of what you're saying. You know, trusting him no matter what, it's better, it's far better, not better, it's far better than trusting the outcome we want. And I think when we can trust in that, and we can rest in that, it all boils down to the image we have of God. How much do we trust him, you know? Anyway, that's something.
Absolutely. You know, it's really deep trust only happens when we have nothing else left. You know?
Yeah, when we have no choice.
You come to a place of like, hey, there's no other option here. There's no other option. The only thing I can do is hang on, you know. And I will tell every one of you as a testimony, he always comes through. He's always faithful. He's always good.
Russell, can I interject a second? Because I'm a man of science, you know, and God established these rules at the beginning of time, and these are rules that will happen and play themselves out in their natural states. Like, for example, the rules of physics, you know, the gravity, the heat, cold, light, the rules of chemistry, you know, the attractions between the atoms and the molecules, and the chemical reactions that normally take place between them, and the rules of biology, you know, the way our bodies are designed, and the way our body grows from 2 little cells, and the way it changes, and the way it controls itself and heals itself. You know, these are set rules that are going to play themselves out. And God has elected not to go against his own rules. And these things are going to happen. You know, nature is going to happen. You know, disease is going to happen. These things have been established from the beginning of time. And that doesn't mean that even though I'm a man of science, I don't have the humility and the trust to live in awe of him, and to believe that I can still trust him. I can trust him because he's been in control all this time, and these are rules that he set forth, and that he's the ruler of all, you know, and I believe in him, and I trust him, and I humble my knowledge to his will.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, and yeah, I think God, in everything God says in His Word, ultimately lines up with true science, the truth of science. You know, but He also, as the Creator, He can rearrange scientific laws at His will. You know, but it's one thing that it's settled with me, and has helped me to continue to have success in my own life and in my ministry, is having truths, fundamental truths that are non-negotiable. And one of those, first and foremost, is the goodness of God. Is he good? Does he treat people with love? Does he is everything that he does? And I'm totally convinced that everything God does is for our good. He's not selfish, and he's not self-centered. He's the exact opposite. Every single thing, and he should have the right to be selfish and self-centered, but everything he does is for our good. Is to help us out, you know. And second of all, is that I'm totally convinced that he wants to heal every disease. He wants to heal every sickness, and he wants to remove all pain. And so that's where I start from when I go to pray for someone, because a lot of times I go to pray for someone, and sometimes the conditions that they have are absolutely overwhelming. If I look at those conditions with my natural eyes, and I see people as well. I mean, you know, not just talking about physical things, but emotional things. I see people that very apparently are really having a rough time with life. and I would almost rather minister someone with stage 4 cancer than somebody that's, you know, really having a really tough time in life. Maybe some homeless person or somebody battling some great addictions. But the same God that heals the cancer heals the addictions, the dysfunction.
Amen.
You know? And it's always his will, just as much as all of us would not even question whether it's his will to heal somebody of their dysfunction and their addictions and all of that. It's always his will for him to heal people of their sicknesses and their diseases. And that's just that's something that's settled in my life, and it's something that I don't have to challenge. Why people sometimes don't get healed, I'm not sure. And I won't blame it on some things that we've tried to blame it on the past. I mean, some of us have been around a long time. We went through the faith movement, and they said, you don't have enough faith, brother. You know, and sometimes it might have been that, but sometimes it had nothing to do with their faith. Even in the Bible, there was many people that got healed that had zero faith, and they still got healed, you know? So, and I don't, you know, we can play mental gymnastics, but I just go for it. I just jump in and go for it when I see somebody like that. And there's a lot of times there's a little doubt that I can see trying to creep in the back, and I just push it out. And if I see that doubt really pushing in hard, then I just go for it even more, you know, and I take risks in that. So I wanted to, there's another passage that I think is really fundamental that kind of deals along these same lines, and it kind of incorporates it all together. 1 John 4:14. Oh, it's 4. 1 John 4, 16 through 18. 1 John 4, 16 through 18, it says, "We have come to know and have believed the love which God has for us. God is love. And the one who abides in love abides in God, and God abides in him. by this, love is perfected with us so that we may have confidence in the day of judgment, because as he is, so also are we in this world. Now, I want to stop there for a second. Once again, it comes back to this judgment day. What does that look like? How's that going to be? I want to be honest with you. I don't totally have a clear picture of it. I'm not really sure what some day of judgment is going to look like. I think partially each one of us, when we come to the end of our life, there's a judgment, and this is what's hard sometimes. We equate judgment with condemnation or punishment. And judgment sometimes is simply calling something what it is.
Well, you know, Russell, when Bradley was with us, he did a whole teaching on the word judgment, and he said
Wow.
the root word in the Old Testament and in the New Testament for judgment is love.
Wow.
So I was going to say that much earlier, but I saw. Sorry.
Yeah, so you guys probably have a deeper understanding about it than that because of what he taught. But so the day of judgment, you know, unfortunately, our spiritual leaders and mentors have given us this great fear about that judgment. But what if the judgment is to tell how he sees you? Because the Bible is very clear that the way he sees us isn't the way we see ourselves. That he sees all of us through the body and the blood of Jesus. So what if his judgment is saying, you know what, the way you've always seen yourself is that's not the way I see you. This is the way you are. I see you because you're hidden in Christ. So when I see you, I see Christ. I see Jesus, you know. What if it's that instead of, you know, this sickness is the judgment of God? And I mean, I've even heard people recently saying, this is what the Bible's told us about. This is it. It's here. It's right on us. You know, but what were they saying 400 years ago with the bubonic plague? What were they saying 100 years ago with the Spanish flu?
With SARS, and they said the same thing with MRSA, and they said the same. Every time there's a disaster,
yeah,
it's the judgment of God. It's all over. 2008, the financial collapse was the judgment of God.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny because I was listening, and I'm sure you've heard this, Russell. I'm sure, and so all of you probably have heard it. You know, we talk so much about the fall, Adam and Eve sinned, and blah, blah, blah. And what was the first thing that God did when he found, well, he knew, so when he found out, when Adam and Eve finally decided to own it and tell God what they did, what was the first thing God did?
Clothe them.
Huh?
To clothe them?
He covered their shame. And you know, it's funny because you were talking about the Old Testament earlier and the New Testament and all that. And the other day I was listening to some guy, I forget who it is, and he says, if we really read the Old Testament, the pursuit of God is not wrath. He always offers love first.
Mm-hmm.
And then we face the consequences of what we've done because we don't want to receive the love. And it's funny, I did some reading of the Old Testament from there, and it's true, this guy was telling the truth, you know, that because everyone just talks about the anger in the Old Testament, and then and I'm like, no, he pursues us with love. And then when we reject the love, we're just facing the consequences of our stuff. So I just had to, I didn't have to, but I wanted to interject those thoughts.
Yeah, great point there. In this verse 17, it even says it here, so that we may have confidence in the day of judgment. You know, I think probably if we did a survey of the people that are here today, how many of us have a confidence in that day of judgment, you know? And why don't we? And why should we? And maybe this is in verse 18, it says, there is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear, because fear involves punishment, and the one who fears is not perfected in love. So there is no fear in love. Really, I think we, when we're walking with God in fullness, in health and all, we become fearless, because we come to the place, even as this coronavirus, I was talking to a friend, a very wealthy friend in another part of the state, and he lives in a lot of fear about his health because he suffered some health issues. And, when I told him that my wife had gone through and she'd already been healed up, and that I hadn't had any problems, and we'd been quarantined for 14 more days after that. And then he found out that I was going around in the community. He's like, why are you doing that? Why are you exposing people like that? And I'm like, well, I mean, I'll listen to you, but I'm just not acting in fear, and as I go out, I'm trusting. I'm not trying to be presumptuous, and I'm not trying to be selfish, but I feel like scientifically we've gotten to the other side where we've built up an immunity. Second of all, I'm just not going to live in abject fear in the midst of it. I'm going to be wise, and I want to be protective of everybody, but I'm not going to be cowering in my house, afraid that someone might come and infect me. And if I did that, I wouldn't have done almost anything I've ever done in my life, in my ministry.
And I'm glad you're bringing all this stuff up, Russell, and I've been really struggling with this and dealing with people with this. We're all, and it's not only this time in the coronavirus or the COVID-19 or whatever, we're always only so focused on the negative. And yet there's so much going on. And like, for example, when I heard your story, I've even been I heard your story 2 days ago, and I'm saying to people, well, everyone's getting well. And a lot of people are not getting it. And all we're talking about, and it's so typical of our faith. It's all doom, it's all gloom, it's all we're going to hell, and God's angry, and God's going to punish us, and everyone's just talking about everyone that's dying. And I understand they're dying. I'm not confused, and it's sad, and people are struggling, and people are suffering. But what about people who are not getting it? A lot. What about people who are recovering? A lot. What about people who are only in bed like normal cold and flu? A lot. I mean, I was talking to Giovanna this morning, and I read a scientific document. You have to spend 15 minutes in the guy's presence who's got COVID-19, who's hacking to death, to get it. So, but I think it's all our negativity, because we live in fear. We live in constant fear. We talked a few weeks ago, I think, I forget what I said and how I said it. One of the phrases that when anybody shows up in the Bible, the first thing they say is, fear not, be not afraid. I mean, you got to be wise, you got to be prudent, you got to be, and we got to be careful. I'm wearing a mask, I'm carrying sanitizer, I'm following the rules, but it's like, it reaches a point, I don't know. I just thank you for sharing that, because I think it's all just so negative. But it's not just COVID, it's our life,
Yeah. And it goes back to Jack, watching Jack as a godly man that was so fruitful in so many ways. And why didn't he get healed? I don't know, but the next person I see with lung cancer, I'm going to go after it. I'm going to go for it. And I'm going to put Jack's situation in his life kind of on the back burner, because I can't afford to have that in front of me. Because one thing I've learned is whatever we focus on increases. Whatever we focus on is magnified before us.
Well, I'm glad you're saying that, Russ, and I really respect you for that, and I really agree with you on that, and I have to agree with you. And I struggle against the wave of your type of thinking, because most people, Richard Rohr says, we become what we behold.
Right.
And if we focus, can you say that again? You said it very well. I can't even.
I said, whatever we focus on is magnified.
Magnified. It is.
Yeah. So that's why we have to really control what some people call our eye gate.
Yes.
We got to focus, we got to control what we're focusing on. So how about this, in as an application in this. Instead of focusing on, I heard the story a couple of weeks ago of this 40-year-old Cuban American guy that was buff and fit and all this stuff, and he got the virus, and 3 days later he's dead. How about we focus on the 104-year-old man, the World War II veteran that got it, and he's already healed and whole and healthy. And he says, it was whatever. He said, I faced World War II in Europe. This was nothing compared to that, So, not to diminish the suffering that many people go through, but focus on the right thing. And in this particular instance, the vast majority of people that they call asymptomatic as well. I mean, the vast majority. So but and how about this? I really have learned that fear opens us up for what we fear to take place in our lives. If we deal with that fear, we close the access of that into our lives. So our biggest battle, really, our biggest spiritual warfare is to control what we think,
right,
and what we allow to go through our minds and then affect our emotions at the time. So, and it's not easy. I mean, fearlessness is not our goal always. Sometimes our goal is courage in the midst of fear, because it's going to be hard to escape, and we don't need to get down on ourselves when we see ourselves struggling with fear. We need to encourage ourselves that even though there's fear there, that we have courage based on a greater reality, which is, listen, God's powerful. He's bigger than this virus. He's bigger than my economic situation. He's going to provide for me. He's able to restore everything that I've lost. He can do it instantly. He can do it over a long period of time. He's always a good provider. He will keep shelter over my head. He will feed me. He will provide for me. I believe in that and I trust in it. Right now, it's scary. I don't know where I'm going to get money to pay my rent. I don't know, all those stresses, but God. But he is big, but he is powerful, but he is perfect. And in his love for me is greater than I could ever imagine here on earth. Those are the things that help us get through all of that, and if I was to get sick, then I just trust him that I'm going to get well. But what happens to some, and I believe this is probably true, that some get sick and they've heard the horrible things that's happened to other people, and all of a sudden they just get racked with fear. Like my wife's employee spent 3 weeks in the hospital, 8 days in intensive care, and she's not a born again believer at this point, but she reached out to Carrie one time. She says, "I am scared."
Yeah.
I am scared, and Carrie encouraged her. So anyway, that's part of the battle.
Russell, can I interject for a second? Like I am that very fearful person that you and Lucky are talking about. I am, and Russell, you have been so gracious with me, and you have prayed over me in this month several times, and like I know Lucky and Giovanna have also. But what I am starting to see is that when I'm starting to have fear, starting to see it as an opportunity for me to invite courage to come in, for me to remind myself of the thoughts that I could be having that I'm not choosing. It's been a struggle, but it has been very encouraging to be also received gently in my fear, because to tell someone, what are you so scared about God is great, or you're gonna be fine, you don't need to worry about that. Doesn't work, because when you go back to your childhood wounds, like in my childhood wounds would be don't be stupid, don't say anything, don't complain, or here you go again, you're so fearful. you know. And I think many of us have been struggling with those childhood wounds coming up where we have not been able to express our fear. We don't need to live in the fear, but maybe not being able to express the fear causes more fear. Does that make sense? And I don't know if anyone is going through this, but
And I think, and I think you're right, Gigi. I mean, the thing is that yes, we are afraid, but it's like everything else. And Russell's saying the same thing. I think we need to fight back, and it's not a matter of not being afraid, and it's not a matter of telling people, well, come on, you know, get on with it. No, the thing is that even in what we do at Hope for Life, forget about COVID, people are not willing to fight back. So yes, you're right. You got to fight back. And we all got to fight back. Even Jesus had to fight back. When Jesus was led into the desert, he didn't just say, oh, okay, you're right, you know. He fought back.
yeah.
He fought back when he was led into the desert. But the thing is, people are not willing to fight back. So you're absolutely right. So there's nothing wrong with being scared. I'm scared on bad days. But you know what? What's that? Russell, the renewing of the mind, you know?
Yes.
Paul talked about that. And so I think this is where we need to encourage each other. I think this is what Russell's trying to do, I think.
But also I think what the reality of the fear, you know, like Russell said, the his wife's co-worker, I think, got it worse than your wife, right? Is that
Carrie?
Carrie.
And Carrie, right.
So I think also the reality for each one of us,
Right.
you know, like I know like somebody financially can lose their finances and then end up homeless. And then that's why a lot of us are fearful of what happens if I ever lose my financial stability per se. We went through that.
Like when we lost all our money, we thought we're going to end up under a bridge. And we nearly did, but we didn't.
So, and the reality is that I think then you stay focused on your reality, you know, and those fears, what of those fears are real and what of those fears are not?
Our childhood wounds. And I think Gabor Mate, in his video, which I've sent to a lot of you, covered that point that Russell's trying to say. And Gigi, you're saying the same thing very well. And that's why I really encourage everyone to watch that video, because it's a lot of this can be traced back to trauma, father issues, mother issues, family of origin pain, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, Russell, sorry.
No, that's awesome. Yeah.
But everyone's welcome to chime in and ask questions. And this is the usual format, very interactive without disturbing the rhythm, the flow. Yeah.
I would like to share. I think I'm another person that deals a lot with fear and a lot of very high anxiety because of that fear. But one thing that I feel like within my process, what I've learned is, at least for me, I believe it's okay to feel fear and to have fear. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Now, what I do with that fear is what determines the outcome. So for me, I feel fear and I'm like, I have a lot of anxiety, but I still push myself to do things, or I still push myself to believe, or to whatever it is. So even though that I'm feeling the fear, it doesn't matter, because I can still move forward with it. And for me, how I see it, like, that's what we call courage, you know. Mm-hmm. It's not about having the absence of fear, but continuing to have the fear and still doing things anyways, afraid.
Absolutely not. I mean, fear is, otherwise God or the angel, whoever showed up in the Bible, wouldn't have to say fear not if there was an absence of fear. God knows we have fear. That's why every time he shows up, he's like, don't be afraid. Okay.
Yeah. And for me, it's like, it's hard. Sometimes it's easy to carry shame around that and feel like, oh, I shouldn't be feeling fear. I shouldn't be fearful. But the reality is like, it's there. Like, what am I going to do about it? You know? So it's like, I'll feel the fear, I'll acknowledge it, yes, and then I'll still move forward with it.
Yeah, I'm afraid every day.
Yeah.
Thank you, Amarilis. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Russell, do you want to carry on?
Let me just share a couple other things, and then I'd like to pray. I'd like to pray, and then if anybody has any more questions, is another thing that the Lord really showed me this morning. Again, everyone knows John 3:16, right? And for God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whoever believes in Him shall not perish but have eternal life. But how many people know verse 17?
Very good.
This is important. It says, "For God did not send the Son into the world to judge the world,
Amen.
but that the world might be saved through Him."
Everyone should be saved. Amen.
Yeah, God didn't send the Son into the world, and we, there's a lot of people that are seeing where our world is today, and what they think our world is, where our world is, and they say, we deserve judgment. We deserve judgment. Why? Because if they were God, they would be bringing down judgment, and a lot of that's because they have missed understanding who God is. He everything God did and all that He does today is to bring us into health, into freedom.
Thank you, Russell. That's very important what you just said. And it's
Health
amazing.
and freedom. That's what it's all about. He wants us to be health and freedom. And like Amarilis says, fear is a reality, and there's a lot of fear that's actually good.
Yes.
Because it warns us.
Yes.
To stay away from dangerous things. If something is a real danger to you, it's a good fear in that sense, but it's a bad fear when it paralyzes and when it enslaves. So everything God did and everything He does. Now, I believe that we reap, just like Laki said earlier, we reap the consequences of bad behavior and bad decisions. And that's the truth. But just like it says in the latter part of this verse 18 of 1 John 4, because fear involves punishment.
Yeah, well.
And the one who fears is not perfect in love. Honestly, I've lived a lot of my life of hating punishment or afraid of punishment. It's not a pleasant thing to be punished. And I will say this as well. I've seen a tendency in the church, especially when someone's in leadership, when they finally are exposed in their struggles or their failures or their sins, there's a lot more of a tendency to bring punishment to that person than to bring restoration. And the Bible is very clear. It says, when you find your brother in sin, restore him with humility. So it causes me to think, and this is what I want to leave everybody with over this next week. How do you see discipline in comparison to punishment? Maybe think about that throughout this week. As you just go about your week and you're just thinking about things and thinking about God, what is the difference between discipline and punishment? Because, and look at these verses in Hebrews chapter 12. Look through that whole chapter. It talks about the chastising of the Father. He chastises. How do we fit that into our understanding of who God is? But it talks about Him disciplining. But unfortunately, most of our experiences, there's no difference between discipline and punishment, and that's wrong. We got to get that right. And the difference is, and this is one of the big differences to summarize, the difference between God's treatment or the way He deals with mankind before Christ and after Christ. Before Christ, he dealt with people from the outside in. But through Christ, since we that are in Christ are temples of the Holy Spirit, he deals with us from the inside out.
Can you
Wow.
repeat that, please?
Yeah, one of the biggest differences, the way God deals with us, deals with mankind before Christ and after Christ, is before Christ, the only way he could deal with us was from the outside in. But through Christ and through what Jesus did for us, he now deals with us from the inside out. The problem is much of the structure around us is still based on an outside in model of discipline instead of an inside out. And you can keep people in line for quite a while from the inside out and from the outside in when you enforce it through punishment. But you won't see any real change. You'll just see a difference in the appearance. But when you allow people to deal with things from the inside out, then that's when true change takes place. And as leaders and people of influence, when we come with a paradigm of punishment, we're actually stunting the ability for God to transform people's lives.
Mm.
When we come with a place, and this is the tension, and with this I'll start leaving. I know people, Christian leaders, that when a leader, especially a leader, has a moral failure, they feel like if they don't come down strongly on that person's behavior, then they create an atmosphere that gives freedom for others to act out that same behavior. But that's a lie. In other words, say for instance, as an example, your worship leader is married and has an affair. Then you, as a pastor or leader, you have to punish that person so that the rest of the congregation will know the severity of that sin, or else the rest of the congregation is going to start saying, you know what, I think I'll do a little bit of that myself, you know. And some people even say, if you don't do that, you're just releasing a spirit of adultery over the congregation, you know. But all you're doing then is causing that person to learn how to put down, and then everyone in your atmosphere, in your surrounding, is going to do the exact same thing. If they had anything that would cause them to have an access in their lives to fall into that same sin, guess what? They're going to stuff it all down. That access is still going to be there. Probably the door's going to open up even wider, and they're going to fall into it even more so. But when you deal with someone with grace and love and say, really, the victory is you opening yourself up, you know, seeking out help and being vulnerable and honest, then we can deal with that. And then other people in your surrounding that have their hidden struggles will be able to say, and that's what I love about this ministry, they'll be able to say, you know what, I can be honest here. I can show you my dirty laundry, and you'll still love me and you'll still support me, and I'll get healthy and I'll get well in the process, you know. So that's, and it comes because we don't fear punishment, but we're being perfected in love. So that's the tension. And that's, as I go around, especially Latin America, it creates a lot of tension when I begin to deal with this subject, because everything that they've ever learned, either by their governmental structure or by the religious structure from which their culture is shaped, it's all based on control through fear. And so when someone has a failure, they come down hard on them and punish them. And it doesn't help. It actually exacerbates the situation and makes it worse. So, and it's based on the wrong vision of who God is. Once again, Jesus, in all of his dealings with everyone that came broken and hurting and struggling to him for help, he received them and he brought healing to their lives, and with compassion and grace always. So just want to leave you with that, this week, as you go about your day, begin to just ask God to give you revelation on perhaps how you have found yourself living in a culture of punishment, and how that compares to God's culture of discipline. To me, it kind of sums up this way: discipline is what I do to my body when I make myself exercise. I'm disciplining my body so that it's not fun sometimes. Sometimes it is. It's a blast, but sometimes it's just it's not pleasant, but the results of it are very pleasant. Where I'm look better, or I can do things that I couldn't do, or I feel better. All of those things. And that's what God is doing in our lives. There are times in listen, everything I've shared about his love and his grace and his mercy does not change his standards. His standards are still there. But the only way I believe we can get to live those standards is by surrender and beholding him as he is. Because the greatest thing that happens in our lives, the greatest transformation is when we see him as he is and we become more and more like him. It's not by working really hard to behave better and dealing with those things and sometimes even punishing ourselves. It's by seeing him as he is and gazing at that and contemplating that and living in that. And it's supernaturally, we become more and more like him in the process. So,
Russell, may I share something?
Yeah.
So you said something and I Googled it and I really wanted to share this. It's 1 John. See, I think we have it all. I don't know. Listen to the words. We have come to know and believe the love which God has for us. God is love, and the one who abides in love abides in God, and God abides in him. By this, it is perfected with us, so that we may have confidence in the day of judgment. Look at that, playing with judgment and love in the same verse. Because as he is, so also we are in the world. And then you went on to say there's no fear in love and perfect. Yeah. And it's funny because earlier you read John 3:17, and I really struggle with this with a lot of people. Text out of context becomes death. But text in context is life.
It's truth.
It's truth. But
Lucky, can you repeat?
who was that?
Carolina.
That was beautiful.
Sorry,
Beautiful.
you want the verse? You want the verse?
Yes.
It's 1 John 14:15, and you can just read on and on and on. It's kind of around there. 1 John 4.
I think
1 John 4:15. No,
Thanks, G.
No, about the texting and disconnect or whatever you just said about the life.
that context, that it taken out of context is death, but taken in context.
I love Russell because Russell and me, in a lot of ways, not always, we think a lot alike because we have kind of the same mentors. We've been through kind of the same type of walk. Whenever I had lunch with Russell a couple of times, and we realized we have so many same friends and we quote so many of the same people. I heard this somewhere from Richard Rohr, I think, recently. Text out of context is death. And so text in context becomes life, becomes, like Giovanna says, truth. And so much of and it's not the Christian world, it's the denominational world that is using all these texts out of context, trying to tell us God doesn't, I mean, God loves you if. And yet Paul in all his epistles, and people hate this word, grace. But real grace. The real grace, not just, we have the songs, is it Amazing Grace? We sing it. And we should read Paul's epistles about what he really says about grace. There is no if. Well, I have to be careful. Russell's here, and maybe some other people are here. I don't want to offend. I want to be careful that I don't misquote the Bible also, because I can misquote it. But, anyways, I already said what I have to say.
Yeah, this is the other verse I wanted to share. It's a powerful verse. It's 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 18.
Yeah.
2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 18.
Beautiful.
No, I want to start in 17. 2 Corinthians 3:17 says, "Now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. But we all, with unveiled face, beholding as in a mirror the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from glory to glory, just as from the Father, from the Lord, the Spirit." That's kind of poetic, and it's a little mysterious, but I boil it down to this: where the Lord is, there's freedom.
Amen. Amen. Amen.
And when we start looking in a mirror, we see God in ourselves.
Amen.
It's a crazy mystery, but the Bible says we were made in His image.
Amen.
And I think a lot of us have a very distorted view of who we are. But when we begin to ask Him to show us Him in us in a mirror with an unveiled face, I think that thought of a veiled face is without the filters and without the distortions and the lenses that we've had, we start seeing Him, then we are transformed even more into who He is.
Without the masks, Russell.
Without the mask, yeah.
And it's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So to me, listen, I spent a lot of years just trying to make myself better. Doing whatever I could to get better, and I kept failing. But I think some of the greatest transformation is when I just began to just surrender and gaze at Him and contemplate Him in all of His perfection and all of His beauty and all of His goodness. Then it just happens that He transforms me to look more and more like Him.
Amen.
And the things, the nasty things of me that I didn't like about myself, all of a sudden they begin to disappear, and they don't show up anymore like they used to.
Wow.
Yeah.
I got a little download that I wanted to share, because this has been so beautiful, because what I'm seeing in my fear is that I stop focusing on God, right? And when I don't focus on God, I cannot see Him in me or me in Him. But here, this is what I wrote. Satan's greatest victory is not for us to see him as God, but for us to see God as Satan.
Mm.
And I think that has really been a big block in my life, and I dare to even say in some of us. Because like he was telling me the other day, I keep making God into my own, into the image of myself. And you wrote it in your blog, and I mentioned it to everyone, that phrase really popped at me. And I think this is God speaking to me anyhow, that how many times I have not just turned God into myself, but into the evil one. that I just have to go with his flow and not believe that he's good. And I think that's been yeah, I just wanted to share that.
Wow. That did you just get that as a revelation?
Yeah, I just got it down.
That is awesome. Wow. I'm writing that down right now. That is
Satan's greatest victory is not for us to see him as God, but for us to see God as Satan.
wow.
It's like he's been distracting us, trying to make us believe that we should not see him as God. But what we're doing is that we ourselves are turning God into Satan. So
Can I say something, Gigi?
of course.
Going back to the fear thing, I wrote it in Spanish, so let's see if I can translate it. You know, guys, that I deal with depression, and that really kind of like bothered me and hurt me sometimes, most of the time. So I was wondering what happened when you get in fear, and then you froze, and you have no strength. You have no strength to fight. You wait out of there. What to do when you get paralyzed, when your mind is attacking you from all the angles, every angle, and it's impossible to get any positive thinking in there. I mean, that means that I don't have the love of God, because they say where God love is not fair. So what, I do not have the love of God, or I don't have any freedom on God when I be feeling like that, because I be in and out of this thing. And it scare me, because it doesn't just not hurt me, but I feel like I'm not there for my family, because of the thoughts that get to my mind most of the time. All those bad thinking that keep attacking, and you have no strength. And Russell said that to think positive thinking, but at that time nothing positive come in your mind. So how you fight that?
Yeah. You know, one of the things I do sometimes to battle depression, this is one thing I've learned is to sit down with a pen and a paper and write down your thoughts, the thoughts that are predominant in your mind, and then, you know, kind of make a list of those thoughts. This is what I'm thinking, be very honest. And then on the other side, say, what does God say about this? You know, so on one side, it's all the thoughts, because a lot of times depression is just having predominantly negative thoughts or lies
Most of the time, I think.
in your life. So compare that to what God says about it, and then work towards changing that from the way you're thinking to this is the truth about that. This is what I've been thinking, but I identify that as not the truth, but this is what the truth is. And sometimes you have to see it before yourself like that. And then another thing that I do sometimes when I'm down and not really thinking straight is I just start writing down, making another list of everything that is good that's happening around me. And I don't focus on the bad and what's not happening. I focus on the good and what is happening. And sometimes it might take about 10 minutes to prime the pump. You know, sometimes you're sitting there and you're like, I can't even think of one good thing. But just stay with it. Keep pushing. And then you write down one thing. And when you write down one thing, all of a sudden another thing happens. It's just like priming a pump. And all of a sudden you get that flow going. And before you know it, you're going to have a list of 30 things there. So, and that's a great exercise, just a practical exercise to overcome, you know, that pit of depression. And once you see that list, you say, you know what, man, that's the truth. I've been believing a lie all this time, you know, and there's always something there. So you might think, well, I can think a long time. I can't find one thing. Think of something. God, there's not just one thing, but one thing will prime the pump and will start it flow. in a lot of ways. So I don't know if that helps a little bit.
And Russell is another thing that I don't understand too. Like, why? Like in January, I was real down. February, March, and April, I'm good. And then you go down again. It's like a roller coaster. You don't know when this thing is gonna hit my mind. I mean, I'm good all of a sudden, and then I start seeing creeping in and getting bad, and then I run to get supplements because I don't want to take medication. And you know, it's like when this thing is gonna end completely out of me.
Yeah.
I mean, like I just want them out because it's tiring. It takes all my strength, my energy, mind and physical.
Yeah.
I wanted
to share something.
Sonia, I wanted also to say that I know sometimes I've suffered from that fear that paralyzes you, from that fear that I mean you don't feel you can move. But for example, having someone to walk life with that will encourage you also, that will, because maybe sometimes, like you say, you might not have the strength to look at what's good, but to have a community, to have someone that walks with you. I know, for example, I don't think I would have ever made it to the first class, to give the first class nearly 5 years ago. I was so terrified. I wanted to throw up. I was so paralyzed with fear, but I remember Gigi being there. I remember Giorgio being there. I remember seeing the face of Raphael and my stepdad. And I remember just the encouragement. You can do it. You will be able to do it. You're gonna be able to do this. And I remember I felt like when you're a mule, when you're pulling a mule, like it digs, it heals. But you know, their encouragement actually brought me to, okay, you know, I'm gonna do this. So I know what it is to be in that fear that paralyzes you, that sadness, that anxiety. But I think sometimes walking it with somebody else makes that burden much lighter, nicer.
No, and I think it's very important, Sonia, because we've known you for many years. I mean, I have bad days almost every day. And on Tuesdays, on Thursdays, and Saturdays even, I don't want to go to class. I don't want to show up at Hope4Life. I don't want to show up at Hope4Life of all the people. And, you know, I start seeing I start seeing one face, I start seeing another face, I start seeing another face. And before you know it, I'm happy, you know? And I mean it, I'm not being funny. It's true. You know, so I think, you know, this is kinship. I was reading this from Greg Boyle yesterday. Kinship. We can't.
We help one another.
Where we help one another. And what does help look like? Anyway, so that's.
Thank you.
Sonia.
Can I say something about that too? Is first of all, you're going through a renewing of your mind. And it's a process. It takes time, and you, just like Giovanna and Laki were saying, we need people to walk through that with us at times, because you know I've dealt with a lot of people with depression. I have my oldest son. It lives in depression, and one of the characteristics he has is he's constantly thinking the wrong way. Yes. And he doesn't even know it. So
plus you want to be alone too.
Yeah, I mean, he goes and hides in his room and doesn't come out, and he when I get him to express his thoughts, what he's thinking, is like those thoughts are so wrong, they're so out of nowhere, and we need one thing you have to do, and I think this is a long-term process. This can't be solved today in this little time, but it's a process, and you've got a great team to walk with in this. And also to push through those times when you don't feel like inviting people in, and do it anyway so that they can help you see things the way they really are. You know, invite feedback. So, because I think a lot of people in the midst of depression, you have a hard time seeing things as they are, but we need that reinforcement constantly of, from others that see things as they really are, so that they can encourage us through that time. And then the peaks and valleys won't be so big. You'll start evening out. The valleys will start rising up because you're no longer overcome by the negativity, you know. So it's a process. You got to push through and ask people to continue to help you to speak your life, and to be willing to receive the truth when it's there. And most of the time, the truth is much better than what you're thinking.
Yeah.
You know.
Can I also share like one thing?
Who's sharing?
Gina.
Oh, Gina, go ahead, Gina. Go ahead. Pick up, please.
Sorry. So I also have like been struggling with depression, and one of the biggest things that has stood out to me in reaching out and looking for help has been like, you have your feelings and your thoughts, and for the most part we allow our feelings to just overcome us, overwhelm us, and overpower us and dictate our actions. And that's when you don't want to come to the group, because you're letting your feelings dictate your actions rather than your thoughts, you know. And it's like the power of our thoughts to overcome our feelings is what's going to help us get through this. That's what's been helping me, you know. And like when I start thinking, you know, like I don't feel like going to the group, I don't feel like talking to someone, I don't feel like reaching out, because, you know, most of it is because I feel like I feel shameful, you know, like because I haven't been feeling good, or I haven't been doing my best or whatever. But it's in those times that I have to think like, you know, I just have to get myself through that, you know, because it's my feelings, like my fear and my shame and my feelings that are gonna overcome me and are gonna take away a blessing, you know. And it's like thinking, allowing your thoughts to dictate your actions and not let your emotions.
So somebody
I
taught
also wanted to share
somebody
something.
taught Gina and I a little like a little math equation or something, and this person said thoughts, our thoughts plus feelings equals positive behaviors. So when you think and you feel and you don't act on your feelings, it equals to positive behavior. But when you only go on your feelings and you don't think, and you're just reacting or acting out only from the feelings, the emotions, then it's equal to negative behaviors. So I just thought that little equation was cute, you know, T plus F equals B plus. So thoughts plus feelings is equal to positive behavior, and just feelings equals to be negative, you know?
And it is definitely like a rewiring of your brain, because we've been so trained to go off of our feelings, you know, how does that make you feel and all this. And it's like, we have the power to overcome that. And it is retraining your brain to think and know that your thoughts are more powerful than your feelings. And
Wow, Gina, you go, girl.
thank you guys.
Go, girl. No, but you know, Sonia, I wanted to share something with you. My default mode, ask Giovanna, is isolation. Even today, I can very easily isolate, get depressed, and be in fear.
Yeah.
And I've been in, we can't hear you. I've been in this for decades, just like Russell. Me and Russell are old hands at this, you know? But we fight back.
But what helps you?
You.
Thank you.
Let me interject.
Lucky, right answer.
Can I share something when you're done?
Fearful, and I get Giovanna has to tell me, stop watching TV. I'm not drinking anymore.
But you listen.
I watch TV.
And that also has a lot to do with where you get stuck in your feelings, is what you
by taking action.
Yeah, and it is taking those actions of what it is you want to surround and like fill your mind with, you know, what you're feeding your mind, what you're feeding your surroundings and all that. It has to do, like, everything is going to impact you. So if you're constantly like watching the news or listening to people who are in that negative environment, or, you know, if you're just constantly surrounding yourself around that energy and those thoughts and feelings and other people's feelings, you know, like that's what's gonna get you into your feelings rather than your thoughts. Like if you're surrounding yourself around like group and messages and constantly seeking the positive and constantly seeking what's gonna help you and help you get out, you know, and constantly feeding yourself with the word and books, and, you know, like all of that is gonna feed you to help your thoughts become more powerful than your feelings.
Thank you, Gina. Thank
Okay.
you. Did Russell go?
Oh, Russell, yeah.
He probably took a bathroom break.
Oh,
May I say something?
I wanted to add to what Gina just said very quickly, that you're right, because if we are, like many of us come here to the support group saying that we're being triggered by our family or our whoever, but if we're spending all the time with the people that trigger us, or whatever we're surrounded by are always triggering us, how are we fighting that back? Are we spending time with God? Are we journaling? Are we walking? Are we painting, exercising, whatever? Are we in groups? Are we spending time with people who are healthy so that they can help us roll away the tomb and take away all those death claws that Brad and Edith were talking about? Or are we spending time with people that are putting us back into that death tomb over and over and over again?
Yeah, we definitely have to do our parts to protect our minds, you know, and be careful of what it is that we're putting into our, you know, surroundings.
yeah.
Sonia, can I say something to you, Sonia?
Is that Georgia? Oh.
Yeah, that's me. Am I muted? No. You know, I was depressed for many years. I mean, even when I thought that I was in good shape, I was in bad shape. You know, it became a lifestyle to feel bad. Yeah, it was a never-ending cycle, you know. I have to tell you, I was one time, a long time ago, I was on a flight. Where was it? It was a long flight. And I had a magazine with me, a Rolling Stone magazine. I used to subscribe to that magazine. And I was reading an article, and all of a sudden I came up with this thing, you know, this article that talked about the life of a writer by the name of David Foster Wallace. I don't know if anybody in this room knows that guy.
Yeah.
So you know, he's one of the most brilliant writers of our generation. You know, John Updike type territory. And he had, you know, he killed himself. He committed suicide. But they were talking about what led to that suicide, you know, and as I was reading his article, it was not about whether he died or beat his depression or not. The point was that as I was reading that article, most of the things that they were talking about, that there were the reasons for his depression, the way that he was living his life, the way that he was operating within his depression spoke to me, because I was doing exactly the same. And the best part of this whole thing was that I finally found company, because I thought I was the only one who felt that way. You know, I didn't know anyone. I mean, no one that I know goes out there to say, I'm feeling depressed, you know, and I'm feeling this and I'm feeling that. So it's a very shaming condition, you know, and that shame leads anyone to isolation, and the isolation only, you know, expands the feelings of depression. So when I was reading about this guy, and when I started feeling like that my feelings were okay, you know, okay, this is okay. Somebody else feels this way. That was the very beginning of a very long process. We are here, everyone here, I think, at one point or another, has felt bad, has felt anxiety, has felt depressed, has felt a deep sadness, you know, whatever you want to call it, that makes you feel like you can cope with this better. But the reality is that most of us have that in common. And we're here for you, Sonia. You know, you used to come to Hope4Life, and you know, it was really good to see you there, and it continues to be good to see you. We saw each other outside of Hope4Life. We're still here, Sonia. We're here for you. You know, we are here sharing in your emotions. That's true empathy. You know, everyone in this room is truly sharing in your emotions. You know, there is a love of God, and we can talk about all these things that the Bible says to us. We have a pastor here that can tell you all these different verses, and that'll be fine. But if you don't find any solace, if you don't find any, connection with the people that are sitting next to you, none of that is going to help you. So this is the first step. Lucky took me out. He will pick me up in my house and take me out just to run errands, just to get me out of the house. And you have no idea how much that helped. It was incredible. So, I invite you to hang out, because that's the easiest part, It's the most difficult in the sense that we have to lift our shame and sort of let go of it to be open. I get it. But it is also the easiest because it's right at your fingertips,
Thank you, Giorgio. Thank you. It's already 12:17, so we're going to give it back to Russell. So he said he's going to pray, and then we can wrap it up. And then whoever wants to stay hanging out for a little bit, talking, we can do that. But I think just to officially close it and wrap it up, again, Russell, thank you so much. Thank you for bringing this word to us. And, it's all yours again to close us in prayer.
Yep. Thank you, guys. What a wonderful group this is, and what a privilege to be here. And I'm getting hungry. And my wife came home and is by the pool, so I feel the pool calling to me. So, but let me pray. Let me pray to finish this time up. And Father, we just thank you. Thank you once again for your word. Thank you for your revelation. Thank you for your love for us. Thank you for your power to transform us. Thank you, Lord God, that we have you as a rock and an anchor in times of trouble, in times of storms. And Lord, I pray for each one that has heard these words today. I pray that you'd seal them in their hearts. I pray for Sonia, that you would give her victory, Lord. I speak forth the victory that you have for her, Lord. And I thank you ahead of time that we will all see it and see your goodness and your greatness in her life, Lord. Lord, we pray that you would continue to work in our lives going forward in these next weeks of uncertainty. Lord, we thank you that with you, it's all going to be good. And we thank you that we have that promise. And thank you for Lucky and Giovanna and Giorgio and Gigi and all the leaders here. Bless them throughout this week. Bless this ministry. We love you and we praise you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
God bless you. Thank you. And if you want company in your pool, we don't mind coming to a company.
No quarantine at my pool. The pool's open.
Thank you.
Yeah. Have a good day. God bless you guys. Love you.
God bless you. Thank you. Bye.